So this is the League of Women Voters Jeffco Observer Corp training. And we took these documents and these highlights from the League of Women Voters US and the League of Women Voters Colorado Observer Corp publication that was dated January 2022. So it's been updated recently, and we are using their information as a starting off point. So why should we have an observer corps? This is really the core question. Why should we do this? Why should we put our energy into this? And these are things that we answer by saying protecting our right to know is integral to the health of our democracy. And so, you know, what is the saying, the Washington Post, democracy dies in darkness. Yeah. You know, this is sunlight. And so this is why we are observing our public entities. The League has been a champion of government transparency since our founding in 1920. And this is one of the things that they were pushing for at the very beginning, is that you can't just go in the back room and have a little conversation and come on out and tell us what we're going to do. That government needs to be transparent. League members attend governmental meetings to learn what their government is doing, to monitor whether those meetings are conducted in an open and transparent way. And we'll talk a little bit about what that actually means here next. Observer Corp keeps elected and appointed officials on notice. They help ensure that issues facing the community are being handled in the sunshine. And so we have badges. We have Observer Corp badges that we can wear. Or if you're doing this by Zoom, you can modify your name to say League of Women Voters Jeffco Observer. And so that, you know, whoever it is, and I don't know if, can you see anything on the side in the gallery?
Yeah. Well, I can.
I don't know if anybody else can see it, but I'll show you when we come off the shared screen. We have these badges that anyone who wants one is more than welcome to take one. And I think that's an important thing that we wear when we go to these meetings. We want people to know that we are watching. And we want to do that in the most friendly way, if we can. If we can be friendly about it, we want to be. But it's important that when we watch and listen and learn, and we'll take action when necessary. And so if they're not following the rules, if they're not doing things in open and transparent ways, then that's something from the observer that we at the board would want to know. So that's the why. This is the next piece that's so interesting to me. This is, I mean, over time, we actually had to put it into law to legislate and codify the public's right to know. And so there is a Freedom of Information Act that establishes that records in the possession of agencies and departments of the executive branch of the US government are accessible to the people. You have it's freedom of information, and you can request those documents because they are public and they are ours. Now, as you know, that is not always as, Christina, did you let whoever that was in?
I did.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, there are times, of course, when people request these records and then the agency, for whatever reason, resists making them available. But that is not our, well, it is our worry. When that happens, then we would speak out against that. But it has been known to happen, as you know. There's also the Federal Advisory Committee Act. Hi, Mary Olson. Nice to see you. And the Government in Sunshine Act, there are also federal open meeting laws. So the federal government has codified the public's right to know. Many states have passed similar laws that in most cases mirror the federal law. Colorado has the Freedom of Information Coalition that has a handy guide that we are actually going to look at. I opened it and I will share the screen for some of that for you. It's very handy. And I think it's helpful when you don't know if the agency you're observing is following the rules. That's really the issue. Are they following the rules? And so, and many times you don't know. So I'll just tell you quickly, throughout this presentation, I'm going to be using the example of the little town that we have a house in Glendale, Wyoming. It's a little town, 200 people. But the people in Glendale, Wyoming have a town council, a mayor, and 4 council people, and they don't know the rules and they don't follow them. And then when you are in the audience and you say, well, you actually can't go into executive session and come back with an answer with a vote, that's not allowed. You have to take the vote publicly. They don't know that. And I mean, I think in some cases it's sort of ignorance on purpose in their case, and sort of a way that things have always been done. But it is also a full lack of training. So these town council people, they get elected and they've had no training. They don't know. And so it's just sort of historically how things are done. And then they also have an attorney that they pay. He is not an elected person and he is not the city attorney. It's not his position. He's just an attorney that they contract with, who is supposed to give them guidance. But because he's the only one in the room that knows, he just sometimes makes it up. And well, no, you can do that. And then when you say, well, no, you actually can't, he gets a little irritated. And so we have called him now on a number of things, because our little new neighborhood has ruffled some feathers. And he tried to pass, for example, a zoning change, and he had the obligation to notify all the landowners in the subdivision and within 200 feet of the subdivision by mail that there was, a proposed change to the zoning, and he didn't do it. So they took a first reading vote, and we said, well, you can't actually vote on this because you didn't notify the people. And he was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, we will have to do that. So then they just tabled it. So if you don't know the rules, they don't necessarily know the rules. It can get a little sticky. Now, most of the people that we're going to observe know the rules. Doesn't mean they always follow them, witness the Douglas County School Board, but they do mostly know the rules. But sometimes if you're not sure, it's helpful for you to know it. And local governments and agencies may have passed similar regulations, but if they did not, they're still bound by state and federal laws. So what that means is the city of Lakewood doesn't have to have a special law that says that their public documents are public. Their public documents are public. They have to follow the Freedom of Information Act, and they have to follow the Sunshine Act in Colorado regarding their open meetings. So they can say, they don't specifically have to have a law saying that they have to do that. Christina? Were you gonna ask?
I was going to ask, the State Board of Education offers school board training. I believe that's who it is. And the Douglas County people chose not to attend. Are there similar opportunities, for council people?
There are, and the state secretary of state often runs them. And in Wyoming, they have a whole handbook that's put out for training of new town council people. And because many of their towns are very small, and this happens a lot. And so there is training available in Colorado, and there's training on every level. Now, whether or not people take it is not required, and usually is a matter of practice and procedure, right? So in Jefferson County, as a matter of practice and procedure, new school board members go to that training. And then the new school board, after it's newly elected, every 2 years or 4 years or however that rolls, every 2 years there's two, and then the next 2 years there's three, so they serve 4-year terms. Every time there's a new board constructed, they have a retreat of some sort, and they kind of go over these are the policies. So for example, this was an example in the county commissioners. They have a policy, it's not a law, they have a policy that says that they don't vote on issues that have been put on the agenda for the first time. So if it shows up on the agenda this time, today, we don't vote on it tonight. We'll vote on it at our next meeting. We can have discussion, we can bring it up, but we want to give some time between having the item on the agenda and a vote. But under the last group of commissioners, they passed a law regarding small businesses and taxes on the same day that was the first day that it was on the agenda. And despite objection and reminder, they still did it. And so, this is something, because it's a policy and a procedure, it's not a law. I mean, they can break their own policies, but then that's something that the league would want to know. I would want to know, if you're in a meeting and they break their own policy, that's something that you send in on that little form, because then we will speak to that. And that's an action we would take. We would write a letter to them. We might write a letter to the local paper saying, And we expect you to follow your own policies and procedures as a matter of course. This was not an emergency. And so that's the sort of thing we would want to know. Okay, next. Who are we observing? So these are the people that we just kind of brainstormed as a group who we might be observing. The Jefferson County Commissioners, the Jefferson County School Board, city or town councils, the town of Arvada, Golden, Lakewood, Edgewater, all of the, we have 13, do we say 13, I think towns, 11 or 13 towns or cities in Jeffco. What's the number, Christina?
11.
11. So, so, you know, those are people that we could be observing if we had enough of us. Sorry, John Gard's on the phone. We could be observing special districts that are, you know, of interest to enough people in the league. The Jefferson County Library Board is somebody that we have not been observing, but given the climate in the country, this is somebody that we might want to start observing. Jefferson County Climate Task Force, I know that our sustainability committee has been pretty involved with the Jefferson County Climate Task Force, but we want to be sure that if we're advocates or advisors to that, that's not the same person who is the observer. So generally speaking, the observer is not a person who would speak for the league or give testimony unless the board approved a specific action. Generally speaking, the observers, we'll talk about this in the next slide or two, and kind of the role of the observer. But normally, if you're a participant, we wouldn't want you to be the observer as well.
Well, I got to tell you that they don't want us to be participants, so we're pretty much observers.
So you're pretty much observers. Well, that's
Yeah.
unfortunate.
Well,
But if you're
yeah.
going every time and you don't get to participate, then we want you to observe and fill out the little form. And if there's something, and you guys would know, Sandy, your group, if there's something that we should be, you know, advocating for or taking a more active role in, then the board, then we'll do that. I mean, it doesn't mean that no
That's
one
what
can
I'm
take
going
action.
to tonight. There's going to be the Colorado Renewable Energy Society is looking at the cap,
Oh,
Jefferson County cap. And what I heard them say the last time I was there, this is very interesting. They are going to have small working groups so they don't have to have a public meeting.
oh no, isn't
Wait a
that
minute, where did they get that idea?
so
Well,
you can have,
I think if you only have 3 people or 4 people, I don't know that it has to be a public meeting.
right, so it's
I guess
not a
that-
quorum, it's a subgroup and it's a working group, and so you don't have to announce every one of those
Yeah.
meetings as an open meeting.
Yeah,
You can have people working on specific things,
so
but
that's gonna be interesting.
if they're using it as a workaround, then we definitely would want to
I
raise
don't
some
know that.
concerns
Yeah.
about that. The Jefferson
I'm
County Housing
suspicious.
Authority is another example of people that we might want to be looking at. And Kate texted me or sent me a message the other day about, you know, maybe we want the Planning Commission, because those are the people who may or may not be talking about or 2 special districts. And so maybe we should be observing the Planning Commission. So these are lists. And if people have other entities that they think we should be observing, and we have enough observers, you know, we can add to the list. We are mostly going to shy away from state entities. So we're not going to observe the legislature or the governor's council or those sort of things, you know, that we're going to try to just keep our own backyard straightened out. So this is really around Jeffco for us, for this group. Okay, best practices for observers. So this is, we lifted this from the state and the US, but and some of it may or may not be particularly appropriate for the group that you're watching. It might depend. So observers should be part of the Observer Corp. So we want people to be identified to us, the board, and as an interest group, and kind of registered so that we know who's watching whom, and that we get some sort of regular feedback from them. Observers introduce themselves to the presiding officer and secretary clerk at the first meeting they attend and identify themselves at subsequent meetings. So for some groups, that that would be totally appropriate. And for other groups, if you're observing the school board, for example, there's not part of the agenda where you just walk around and say like, hello, 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 but you be obvious in the audience, because unless there's something pretty controversial, there's about 5 of you and that don't work for the school district. So it does not bring a large group. And then there's kind of a break usually in the middle where if you were wearing a League of Women Voters observer badge, you would try to catch the attention of the different board members and just introduce yourself, let them know that you're coming, that the league is interested in their work. But there's other meetings where that just wouldn't be appropriate. So you have to kind of play that by ear. But wearing your badge or putting it on your screen as a Zoom member is helpful, so that they know. And sometimes you just can't make it, like you can't be there, and so later you listen to the recorded version or something. I mean, that is certainly okay as well. We can't all be everywhere in real time. So if there's a conflict and you can't get to the meeting, but you listen to it later because they've recorded it, and you send in the little form at the end, then we'd be good with that. Observers introduce themselves to any members of the media. So again, like that may or may not be appropriate. Jefferson County Commissioners, probably not much media. But the Jefferson County School Board, they usually do have somebody sitting in the back taking notes, or occasionally with a camera if they think there's going to be fireworks. The idea here, and this really comes from League of Women Voters US, but the idea is we want them to see the league as a resource. So they might say so have they been talking about this for a while? Or so we would want to develop that relationship without taking positions or actions, without still being pretty neutral. You can answer factual questions. We wear our lapel pins, or we sign in as observers. Observers should arrange to receive the meeting agenda in advance, to verify the availability of the agenda to the public, and to be familiar with the current business items. So this is, again, in some entities, easy. City of Lakewood sends them out. You can just pick them up. Like you can get on their mailing list. You can get them off their website. School board, easy to pick up the agenda, post it on their website. Other meetings, maybe not so easy. And that's something that you would want to note. Well, it's hard to find the agenda. So then I got there, and they didn't really post the agenda, or they didn't hand them out. And they had an agenda, but we didn't have the agenda. Well, those are things that they are, as public entities, supposed to make available. And so we can nudge about that a little bit. Hey, how do we get an agenda? And we can ask those questions. Unless serving as a dedicated spokesperson for the league, observers should not provide commentary or testimony on issues on behalf of the league. And that's really our standard practice. If we're going to take action, we speak with one voice. And so if there's something that starts to get concerning, we'll decide with your help what's the next appropriate action. Should we write a letter? In which case Christina's name would be on it, or maybe I would deliver it, or some other member of the league would speak for the league, and not confuse your role as observer. Or, depending on the issue, we might show up in force. Okay, they're going to talk about banning books at the Jeffco Public Library. We're going to put out a call to action, and we're going to hope that 30 of us are at the next meeting with our League of Women Voter badges on. And we'll just show up in force and maybe have prepared remarks by one of us speaking on behalf of the league. So there are different ways that we might respond depending on the issue. But it's not usually you, the observer, who is tasked with testifying, unless you really want to, and unless that seems appropriate, but never in your role at the moment as observer. You need to have permission from us. Now, I will say Christina received a strong compliment at our unit meeting around how that kind of approval has really become much quicker. People want to take action. You have a thought in mind about what action we should take. We're going to get that happening pretty quickly. And Christina and the board have been very responsive to requests for action. And so I think we need to give them kudos, because that used to be kind of a long wordsmithing, 45 drafts of the letter, yes or no, we're going to do it affair. And we're not there now. We need to take action. Action is what we're about. Stop me if you have questions. So sharing what's observed. So the first thing that we're going to do, and I'm going to bring this up on the screen here next when we're done with this PowerPoint, but we have a form that we have in draft form and that I'll take some input tonight on. And then we'll put it in the documents file on the website. And so the observers can just print off the form, download the form, use it on their computer, however they want to do it. And it's really more of a checklist. So it's observation form. It is not minutes. We are not expecting you to take minutes. We don't want you to take minutes. We don't want the minutes. I don't want to read the minutes. It's really around, did they follow their own rules? Did you have the agenda? Did you know what they were going to talk about? Did they talk about what they said they were going to talk about? Did they listen to people who had a testimony or public comment? And did they respond appropriately? All of those things on the checklist. And then there is a place where you say like, whoa, so this I want to talk to you about, or this I think is an area of concern, or this came up tonight from a public comment and I think we need to be ready at the next meeting for more of that. Those are the things that we want our observers to lift up to me, and then I would lift them up to the board. And I'd probably call you like instantly, like, all right, talk to me about what you just saw and see what you think we should do. But once we have that information, we have a variety of options regarding how to share what's observed. We might send an action alert to membership. They're talking about banning books at the public library. We've got public testimony about banning certain books. We're going to show up. Call to action. We're going to write an op-ed for the local media. And we're going to run a column in the League's newsletter. Hey, folks, in the voter, just so you know, the city of Lakewood is considering blah, blah, blah. And Lakewood Golden is going to take that on, something that's informational for the rest of our members. We might engage membership in a call or a letter writing campaign. We want everyone to write a letter to the school board opposing this decision or supporting this decision, depending. We might ask for testimony. You might testify at a meeting. That often involves reading something that we prepared in advance. We don't usually send you up cold. We've kind of written our position. We say why we support or oppose, but you can speak for us or one of us will speak. And then if it looks like it's going to be a broader issue, we as the board, and Christine is really our liaison for this, we can lift this up to the state or to the National League. Like this is becoming a national problem or a state problem. Any of these actions on this screen would require approval by the board. So none of this are you expected to decide to do on your own. This is something you put on the little sheet and say, hey, Deb, I think we need to alert the membership about this. This is concerning. They're talking about banning books at the library. We're not okay with that. We need to be thinking about this. Or, and then I would take it from there. I would take it to the board. We would get back to you. We would include you, but we would require action approval by the board.
And you notice I'm not shy about having somebody else take over my column when I think the issue's important enough.
Right. And, we might be looking to the expert who is the person sitting on the library observer board month after month after month. And you can tell us how widespread the concern is too. There's one person giving testimony every single month. For example, at the school board when I was still going to those every month. This one guy got up and talked about the cost of pizza, how we're spending taxpayer dollars on pizza for kids. And he got up every single meeting and he gave the same complaint. I don't want one penny of our money being spent on pizza. Well, the superintendent got a variety of people to then come and speak in response to him. Because they don't do a give and take at the school board. Somebody would come up behind him and say, okay, well, all the pizza money comes from activity funds. And when kids are at a track meet and they've been there for 12 hours, like we got to feed them. And so pizza is easy and it's not allergic, and you can get a lot of pizza for not a lot of money. And so they would kind of come with the facts. So this guy, he did that a fair amount. That was something that you would lift up to me. We may or may not respond to the pizza guy. But if it is around curriculum or books or restrictions that we would not support as a league, that would be something that we might talk about. Or we might say, okay, why are you spending $5 million on pizza? Because, good governance is part of our positioning. All right, almost done. If you want to be part of this work, which you're here today, so I'm assuming you just need to tell me directly, like I want to observe the school board. and I'll put you on my list. Or you can think about it, and next week you can say, all right, I've thought about it, and I am gonna go to the city of Lakewood, or I am gonna do the city of Arvada, or Edgewater, or Golden, or whatever it is that you're interested in, the library board. So it's really on the funnel. So if you're interested, or if you know other members who weren't able to come tonight, if they're interested, it's me, let me know. And so the last one is questions. Anybody have any questions about this part of the presentation?
So I guess I have a question about, do we know who's already signed up for any of these entities?
So we don't know formally. We asked at the beginning of the year, and some people said yes, but no one has reported back to me. Like, so we might have people going, but they have not. And so we put in the voter about this training. We were kind of hoping that some people who were doing it would at least kind of say that. So I'm going to kind of go with the assumption that they're not. And if we find out someone is, we can adjust. I think we're nimble enough to figure that out. But I mean, the one example would be Amy Weber at the city of Arvada. I mean, if she really is going to the city of Arvada, we're not getting any feedback from that. Doesn't mean she's not going. It might be perfectly legit, but so if anyone knows someone who is doing that, I will reach out to them, and I'll reach out to Amy because she was on the list in the beginning. But really, Bob and Karen suggested that they'd be interested in the school board, but I know that they're not going. So otherwise, I don't have any information about that.
So, and we don't have anyone observing county commissioners?
So we've been observing the county commissioners sporadically when we know that there's an issue. So for example, they had an approval of special districts, and so we knew about that. And so I read a letter that we prepared for them, asking them to pay better attention to these special districts. And we listened, unfortunately, for hours and hours of testimony about lots of other issues. That was a full hearing, because sometimes they act as county commissioners, and other time it's a hearing on issues. So we had to do both. So we had to listen through to the bitter end. I will say they completely ignored us and did exactly what they planned to do ahead of time in a unanimous vote, no discussion, which was approve the special districts. So that they approved an expansion from 3 to 5 special districts for the Rooney Ranch development, or the Red Rocks development, which is just below Salterra, even though we had some pretty good data about why that wasn't a good idea, but they did it anyway. But we did go on record for that, but because we knew it was coming. But we don't have somebody going every time.
Okay, so I have another follow-up. Mindy Moore probably observes all of the Arvada City Council, but that may be in her capacity because she belongs to Arvadans for Progressive Action. And
Is Mindy
so,
Moore a member?
yes, she's
Okay.
she's a new member.
Okay. So the question, I guess, would be, is she observing as a League of Women Voters observer, or is she observing as more of as an activist for another group? That would be the important thing to know.
Right. So
And-
right now, as an activist
Right. So
for APA,
right, and we would not want that to cross over.
okay.
And so if she's gonna speak out, or if she's gonna speak on behalf of another group, and we would certainly, encourage that participation in local government, but we would not see that as the role of an observer. Okay, good questions. Anything else that we can think of at the moment? Okay, so I am going to put this down, and then I am going to just lift up for your information. So I'm going to share my screen again, and I am going to open this. Yeah. Okay, I don't know why these are coming so little. Can you see that?
I
It
see
looks like-
juvenile court hearings.
Okay, that's what it should say, juvenile court hearings. So this is the Colorado, it's way back here. The guide, the Colorado Freedom of Information Coalition, this is their guide. And the link to this is in the PowerPoint. And I can send it to anyone who signs up to be an observer, but this is the guide that I find really helpful. And it has all kinds of information. You can look at the table of contents here on the side. The Open Records Act, what's a public record, who can ask for it, how do you ask for it, what happens if they don't give it to you, how much can it cost, all of that information, stuff that an observer probably doesn't need to know. But when you get down here to where was I? Colorado open meeting laws. This is what's interesting. Okay, so this is background information that you might want to read if you're an observer of a government entity. And so this talks about what is actually a meeting and can they have subset meetings, and what about a working group? Like, that's all in here. What are the notice requirements? How much notice do they have to give you about a meeting? What is public notice? Can they just nail it on the tree outside the city hall and call that public notice, which is what they do in Glendo? Does there have to be some system for that? Emailing, text messaging. So this is where the Douglas County School Board got in trouble, right? So through a series of emails, they made a decision about the superintendent without having a public meeting. So they had already had that discussion. That's not allowed. And it's around how many, no more than 2 people of a local board can have a conversation without, noticing it as a meeting. And so these are things. It's a little legalese, but it's really, I think, pretty accessible information. And the other thing that I would say about this is executive session. This is a question that I get a lot. What happens when they go into executive session? And so there are reasons that a board, especially, well, all entities could go into executive session. So part of it is they have to tell you why they're going. So when they make a motion to adjourn to executive session, they must tell you the reason. We're going to executive session to receive legal advice regarding something. We're going to an executive session to discuss a personnel matter. We're going to executive session, blah, blah, blah. There's reasons that they can do it. They are not allowed to make a decision in executive session. So they can have the discussion, they can receive the advice, they can discuss the superintendent's contract, but when they come back out, they have to say, there's a motion on the table to approve the superintendent's contract, which then becomes a public document. And then they have to vote on it publicly. So they can't make a backroom decision in executive session. They have to keep minutes in executive session, which are not part of the public record unless they are subpoenaed. But if they are subpoenaed, they have to be available. And so very often, for example, the Jefferson County School Board, they record it, they set it aside. It's not part of the public record, but if you subpoenaed it and you got a judge to agree that should be, that they've done dirty business and they shouldn't have done it, those minutes have to be available. So in Glendo, every time they go into executive session, I remind them, be sure to take minutes because if we get a subpoena, you'll have to produce them. And so they never do, they don't take minutes, and they make all kinds of decisions back there, but I just remind them periodically that they're not allowed. So it talks about authorized executive session topics. And again, they're allowed to go into executive session, but they have to tell you why. And then, so again, this speaks about superintendent finalness for school boards, other executive sessions, talks about secret ballots. So this section about the Colorado open meeting laws, if you're an observer, might be interesting to you. And just so you know what the rules are. And then you can more effectively evaluate whether or not the agency you're observing is following the rules. Now, some of the other rules are harder to get at, like the policies and procedures for the Jefferson County Commissioners, the example I gave you about not voting on items that are first up in the agenda. Those are harder to find. And those kind of policies, they're available, but you got to really kind of scrub for some of that. But once you are doing it regularly, some of those things just become obvious, and they'll say it. Well, it's not our policy to vote on an agenda item on the first time it's on the agenda. So we'll take this up next time. And then that's their rule. So public comment is also an interesting thing. So, some entities don't allow public comment during their meetings. Some say all public comment has to be written public comment. Some say you can only have 2 minutes. Jefferson County School Board has a 3-minute rule. I think 3-minute rule, and then 10 if you're representing a group of 5 or more. You get 10 minutes if you're representing a large group. So these are things. And then what happens if they violate it? And then how does that happen? And etc. So you don't want to read this whole thing because you don't really care about juvenile records and proceedings and juvenile court hearings and stuff. But the Colorado open meeting law section of this handbook is very well done. And I think if you're going to start to do this work, it might be a really good place to start. And so that link is available in the PowerPoint. And anybody who signs up to be an observer, I can send you that link as well. Okay, we're almost done. One other thing to show you is the form, and this is actually something that I might want to get a little feedback on. So this form, can you see that? The observer reporting form? Yes, okay. So you can see that it's mostly a checklist, right? This is something that you say, did the meeting start on time? Were all the members present? This is something where the members attentive and prepared for the meeting. Now, you don't see this too much at the school board, and you don't see it at city council meetings that I've been at, or the county commissioners meetings, but you do see it at committee hearings at the legislature. They're having committee hearings, and the committee members are on the phone, they're getting up and down, they're leaving the room, people are giving testimony, they're not even polite enough to sit there and listen to the people who come. It's just rude and disrespectful. But that is how they operate. If you ever go to attendance court in Jefferson County, it's the same way. It's a flipping nightmare. People are talking, filing, lawyers are moving in and out of the room, the judge is talking, no one's listening. It's ridiculous. Most of the meetings that we'll be observing are pretty well managed, but I'll tell you, legislative committees, ridiculous. So then here's the open meeting law checklist. Did you get an agenda? Are agendas made available for people who show up at the meeting? Are all the discussion items included in the agenda, or are they just adding things on at the end without making a motion? Sometimes they revise the agenda in the beginning. We want to talk about this or that, but there should be a motion to revise the agenda at the beginning of the meeting. Did they call any executive sessions? What was it? Did they talk about non-agenda items? Were members courteous to each other in the public? I don't know how important that one is, but I guess if they're discourteous, that might be important. Was there adequate opportunity for public input? Did items appear to have been discussed prior to the meeting? That's a big no-no. Background material available to the public? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I mean, sometimes you have to do a little work for that. They don't just have everything out on the table. Did any member recuse themselves during the meeting? That's also something that you might, especially when you only have 3 county commissioners. If you have a county commissioner recusing themselves from decisions, that's something that you might wonder about, especially with only 3, right? So then you have 2. And so how was that handled? Sometimes it's appropriate. I mean, we want, especially some of our judicial systems, we should have a little bit more recusing than we do. And sometimes, it's in Wyoming, for example, recusing is a matter left to the person. So if you have a conflict of interest, it's up to you to say that this seems to be a conflict of interest, and the public nor the other board members can't make you recuse. Fascinating. So it depends on the entity and what the rules are about that. Do you recommend local league action on any of these issues? So these are the next 4 questions that I'm, this is the part that you would kind of highlight. If you say yes here, then that, you put a little star so that when I look at this form, when you send it in, I know that this is something I need to be paying attention to. And then this is something else, like, do we find that we're listening, that we need some issues and we're looking for positions, and we don't have them? And, this is something that we just talked about in our program planning meeting. Do we need some revisions to any of our positions based on comment or action that we need to be taking that are unsupported. We don't have much of that, and there might be some tweaking in the housing position, some language work, and there might be some work on some of the other issues. But generally speaking, and even Betty agrees that we can find in our policies and positions standing to support almost any action that we would want to take. Who else in the league needs to know about this? So this is something that we might say, well, you know, this is something we're going to talk to the climate people, sustainability about, or this is something that we want to talk to the housing group about, or immigration, depending on what we're talking about. So there might be an interest group that's following this issue more deeply, and we need to get some information from them. You know, we're not going to know everything. So we might want to ask some people who are more expert in our league about some of these things. And then really, if you need to list anything else, there's a little bit room on this form. So you can take I mean, I'm kind of, I'm more excited about maybe getting this down to 1 page. But, you know, maybe for people starting off some of these questions to just poke you around kind of yes and no might be useful. I think that's something that you can think about and tell me. Because we can draft, you know, we can modify this form and then make it our own.
Yeah, one of the problems with the Douglas County School Board, and that's kind of how do they treat the public, is they were closing the school board attendance at 3 o'clock for a 5:30 meeting.
Public comment.
They didn't have, I mean, you had to be there in your seat by 3 o'clock
Wow.
for a 5:30 meeting. And, you know, that was one of the things that they were going after for them locally was, you know, hey, that's not reasonable.
Interesting. Yeah. So that would be something like that starts to happen. Like that would be something you would want to tell me, because that would get my blood boiled right away. And then we would make that public. Like we would go on a letter writing campaign. We would be writing to the media. We'd be saying, oh, wait a minute. You know, that violates, you know, the spirit, if not the letter of the law around public participation. And, you know, and we're all, one of the things I think that school board has forgotten, and Jeffco at times has forgotten as well, is, you know, all people, whether they're parents of children in the school district, have a say, they have standing because they, you know, they support it with their tax dollars. So, you know, you don't have to have children in the school district to have an opinion about how it's run. And so there have been times in Jeffco where that has been less obvious to some. But also in Jefferson County, at least, you know, I've been gone 10 years almost now, but at the time that I left, the number they used was 70%. 70% of the taxpayers in Jefferson County did not have children in schools, in public schools. So 70% is a pretty big number. And if you want to pass a mill levy, you can't pass one on just the parents alone. So you have to be able to reach out to your constituents in different ways and be respectful of their perspectives, even the pizza guy. Anyway, so I don't know what you think about the form.
I can tweak that a little bit so that, you know, those questions can be on the 2nd page, and then you have plenty of room to sort of do this, and I can get our logo on it. But I wanted to bring up this point to what you just said, Deb. This whole book banning thing in schools around the country, I don't know if it's going to happen here, but if you're saying 70% of the people don't have children in school, but 30% of the people who do have children are bringing up this book banning in both school libraries and probably extended to public libraries as well, because there's an organization, and I forget what their name is, Mothers, not Matt, but it's some organization that's going around the country nationally doing this book banning. So I'm really concerned about that we get to school board meetings, that we get to library meetings, that we...
Well, and that's right. And so then if we heard some parents starting to talk about that, like that's why we want observers, because we get tipped before it's, you know, front page news.
Yeah.
And already, because it would never be the 30%, it would be, you know, 0.0001 of the 30% who have children, but they're the squeaky people. And they start to run for school board, they start to give public comment at school boards, and you don't know it until kind of, we're already halfway down the trail. So these are things that we would want to know, which is why observing on a regular basis, you start to hear those public comments being made, and we could get in front of that before it becomes a movement. And I think that those are things that exactly the right example of why we want an Observer Corp.
Gloria, the group's called Moms for Liberty.
That's right.
That's
Thank
right.
you. It is a mom thing. Moms for Liberty. That's right. That's exactly it. And I, as part of the 70%, I have grandchildren in schools, but myself as part of the 70%, I will take issue with my public dollars going towards both libraries and schools where they're banning books. I'm going to have a problem with that, even though I don't have children in school myself.
And
So I want to know. I want to know.
And I think the league would have a problem with that. I mean, we would speak about that. So I think that's exactly right. And then, we can make that, there can be a counter movement before there's a movement if we know.
And that's the kind of thing we want to show up at the school board for and say, hey.
Right. Well, then we would
being
start to
present.
testify, lots of us, over and over and over, this is not okay, this is not okay, this is not okay. Then we would start to show up in force for those kinds of things. The same way, I mean, my vision of this is the same way that the Moms Demand Action show up in the red t-shirts in vast numbers every time there's a gun bill in any legislature across the country. There's a gun bill being heard in committee, they show up in their red shirts. There's a gun bill being held, on the floor, they're in the gallery in their red shirts. They make a show of force, and they have done great work, frankly, around recruiting people to run for some of those offices, to further their agenda, and supporting candidates who support their agenda of gun safety. So, there's by the way, an advocacy day coming up, I think March 3rd or something.
Yep.
Yeah.
March 1st and March 3rd.
March 1st and March 3rd.
We have
So anyway,
two-
let's just look at the form.
So-
Anybody have a comment, having just taken a quick look at this?
I have a comment.
Great.
If we could reduce it down to one page, it might not be necessary to ask about courtesy and some other things, so that we could get it down to one page. And if discourtesy was an issue, then that'd be something that we could note that, they cussed out the public, or whatever it was. I'm thinking that if you sign up for one of these things, what you're saying is, I'm committed to observing a meeting that's usually held once a month. And I'm committed to looking at the agenda ahead of time. And I'm committed to filling out the form and sending it in. And can it be sent in electronically?
Absolutely. And you can even, I mean, if you're going to write on the paper form, you can take a picture and send it to me that way, and I can convert it and save it. Or you can email me the picture, like any way you want to send it to me. You can text it to me, just kind of like the green sheets.
Could it be done as a team? Could you say, with the three of us are going to do this, and that way, if someone can't do it that time, then we still have.
So I think, to be honest, kind of given the small number of interested people here, and especially since some of us are already a little over committed, Christina's not going to be an observer. And I've already told Kate that she can only be a part-time observer because she's part-time everything else in the whole league. So, I mean, I think if we got people who could commit to, say, the school board, and could manage the load, it'd be better to spread us out. But I also think if you can find a partner that would be willing to do it with you, I totally would support that as well. I mean, no one wants to be, and I also think we need to kind of lift up the fact that many of these meetings and hearings are available to listen to later. So, I mean, if it's a conflict for you on that night or whatever, occasionally, there's no reason you can't catch up with it, within a reasonable amount of time. So, but I'd rather have some than none. So, if you can find a partner and share it, I think that's great as well.
Well, and I'm not even sure I'm going to do this, but I want to take it back to the unit and see if I can talk some people into doing that, because I think we have people who would be good at it. They just have not thought about the fact they would be good at it.
Well, I also think that, we have some people in our group, who are looking for one thing. I think this is a
Mhm.
one thing that you can do that's pretty low visibility. Like, you don't have to be out at voter service tables, and you don't have to sign up to be an election judge. You can just say, once a month, I'm going to go to the county commissioners meeting, and I'm going to fill out this little form, and I'm going to, email it to Deb. Like, it's not a high I don't know, impact job to take on, I guess.
Well, and not only that, but it also, most of the meetings are available in hybrid form, either in person and or Zoom.
Right.
And so a lot of people I know don't necessarily want to go out on a weeknight in the evening for a meeting and then drive home and weather and whatnot. So that's also a selling point, is that you have multiple ways to access the meeting. Later, if you can't attend it live, blah, blah, blah. I'm also thinking of, I've sent several of our event notifications to several friends that I do multiple cultural things with. And I'm thinking one of them might be a really good Observer Corp person. She's really smart and she'd be good at this. And she's always looking for things to do because she feels like she has no purpose. She's really feeling like she wants to be useful. But this is right up the alley for people who are like introverts, don't want to talk, don't want to be seen necessarily other than, as the observer. So I think there's a lot of opportunities also for reaching out to people that are relatively new members and saying, hey, by the way, we've got this really great opportunity for you. If you think about this,
Well, and I agree. I mean, I think we're going to need the personal touch, because I feel like we put it into a unit meeting agenda. We put it in the voter. Christina wrote a pretty strong sell for a very strong sell for Observer Corp. And still we get the same 7 people who do all the work in the league. So I agree with you. It might take in June, it might take some recruiting of people that kind of on the personal touch. And then all they have to do is tell me. I mean, I can send them the PowerPoint, I can send them the forms. I mean, it's not like, that this is not a rocket science training or anything. Like, you don't have to get a certificate. You just have to kind of know the basis of what we're looking for. I don't think it's too onerous.
No, it's not.
So this table that we're looking at right now,
this is something that I just started.
Okay.
So if you know that you want to do this and you have somebody that you want to do, somebody that you think that you might want to observe, I can just add it on here and put your names in. Or otherwise, I mean, we're just hoping to keep a list of who's observing what. And so we have an idea of how we're being covered here. So I missed the Jefferson County School Board.
School board. I was just gonna say, I was looking for the school board because
I was trying to put all the Jefferson County things together. So I'll put the school board here.
And do we know kind of how often any of these meet? Like, I have no clue. Once a month, all of these once a month is, or less often on some of these?
Lakewood City Council meets once a month.
Lakewood City Council meets every other week, don't they?
I think one is like the open meeting, and isn't one like their study session? Don't they alternate that?
Yeah, but that means they have 2 meetings a month. I
They
think.
have 2 meetings. You may or may not want to go to their study session depending on the topic, but yeah.
And the school board's the same way. They have the official meeting and then they have the study session.
Oh, okay. What about the library board? How often does that meet?
I don't know.
Has anybody ever been to
We
one
have
of those?
never observed the library board. I think that this is just something now in today's world that this rose to the level of the list.
Yeah.
Well, and the 2 women that I'm thinking about, one of them used to work for Jefferson County Public Library, so as a librarian. So I'm really wanting to hit her up for the library board.
I'm looking it up now, so.
Somebody else was a librarian.
There's a board of, is that the board of trustees? Is that what they're talking about?
I think it might be.
Not
I'm
really
not sure it's
sure.
Colorado.
Okay, I found the 2022 board meetings list.
I think they meet once a month, because I thought I looked them up one time.
Yep, they do. And I've got all the minutes from last year. that I'm looking
Who's
at.
the librarian in the league? It's somebody. Is it Rebecca?
You were
Who-
thinking Rebecca worked for them at one time. She was
But-
the marketing person.
Yeah,
She doesn't need another job.
no,
No,
Yeah, I know. That's what I
she's
was gonna say.
excellent at
If
what
it's
she's
her,
doing.
it's no good, but
Right.
yeah.
if she
Okay,
finds a
so
librarian, I want to know
it's
about it.
7:31. I feel like, I don't want to hold people too much longer. If anyone knows that this is something that they want to do, just let me know. You can email me, you can call me, you know how to get me. You can text me. Yeah, I'm available on all levels of